이 다음은 마이크 모라이티 AT커니 시니어 파트너님을 기조 연설을 듣겠습니다. 주제는 Drivers of Change in the Global Retail Environment입니다. 벌써 나오셨네요. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 자, 그리고 한 가지 말씀을 드리신다면 연설을 들을 때 도움이 되시라고 동시 통역을 준비했습니다. 테이블 위에 있는 통역기를 활용해 주시면 됩니다.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let's see. We have the slides up. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for asking me here today to discuss trends in retail around the globe. What I'd like to do in the next 25 minutes or so is to share with you A.T. Kearney's views on global retail and also share the results of a number of research analyses and consumer preference studies that we've done to give some more insight into what's happening in global retail. Now, when we think of global retail, we think in three dimensions. The first dimension is the investment in the transformation of developing retail markets. Second, how consumers and shoppers are behaving differently. And third, what are leading retailers doing in response? The first global trend, which has been very strong over the past years, even during the recent years of economic recession, is the growth and investment of global retailers in the development and transformation of developing markets. This transformation of loosely organized or informal wet markets into organized retail with efficient logistics. We think about the markets that are moving from selling live animals, fruit and vegetables, clothing and personal products in open markets to organized retail with more branded product and more organized supply chain. Finally, we think about global retail development as a measure of and an opportunity for the major global and regional retailers who are consolidating the retail sector around the world to bring better, less expensive food and health and beauty products to more and more consumers and shoppers. Now, what makes a country market ready for heavy capital expenditure investment and the long lead times that retailers have to deal with? For the last 15 years, A.T. Kearney have produced the Global Retail Development Index, which analyzes macroeconomic variables to identify developing markets that are ripe for development by global and major regional retailers. Now, this shows the hypothesis that we have about development of retail. You can see it's, we call it a window of opportunity. And what happens is every country goes through about 7 to 10 years of development through this process in 4 steps. It starts when government regulation, real estate, labor laws, logistics become more sophisticated, begin to become more sophisticated, as well as where the consumer and the shopper begins to be rich enough to be interested in branded products. It continues through a phase where more and more global and regional retailers come in and invest in the market, and then after about 7 to 10 years, we see it begin to taper off because the market is too saturated. The consumers are too sophisticated just for somebody to come in and invest. We need specialized formats, specialized assortments. So we start with all of the countries in the world, and these slides will be available on the Chosun Biz website. We start with all the countries in the world for which data exists, but obviously 30 or 40 countries drop out because they're too rich or too developed. This would be like Korea, the United States, France. Others fall out because they're too poor or too risky, like Congo or Afghanistan. But for the 120 that remain, we identify the top 30 countries that should be on every global and major regional retailer's investment radar screen. We look at more than 20 variables for each country, which fall into 4 categories. The first is country market attractiveness, which measures the vibrancy of existing retail, levels of urbanization, which is very important for the development of sophisticated retail, and other demographic factors, and the efficiency of the business market. The Global Retail Development Index is published in June, but we already have some preliminary results for 2015 that I'd like to share with you. So countries that have high market attractiveness this year include Gulf states like the United Arab Emirates and Qatar. Countries that are ranked in the top 30, however, that have low market attractiveness include countries like Mongolia, Sri Lanka, and Nigeria. So you can see that there's a wide distribution of high and low market attractiveness, but still these markets have a window of opportunity for global retailers to invest that puts them at the top 30 developing markets in the GRDI. So there are other factors at work, and let's look at those. The second factor is risk, which is a combination of political risk and business risk. Some countries are risky because everything is risky. Some countries are risky because the government and political processes are risky. We like low risk because of the length of the investment cycle, so low risk is better in the GRDI. Examples of risky countries that still end up in the top 30, however, include Nigeria and Mongolia, where low-risk countries are like, for example, Chile, and again, the Gulf state countries like Qatar, UAE, Saudi, and Kuwait. Big markets like China, Brazil, and India usually show up in the middle of the risk assessment. The third variable that we look at is market saturation, and in this case, we're looking for country markets that are just at the beginning of opening up to modern organized retail formats, where global and major regional retailers are just beginning to make their investments, and per capita retail sales are low but growing, and the market is still fragmented. Remember, most of the global retailers succeeded by going into a relatively underdeveloped market and creating order and efficiency. So market saturation, which reflects the current state of retail, is an important guidepost for international retailers. Good examples of countries in this year's Global Retail Development Index with good scores in this area is Georgia in Central Asia, Mongolia, Armenia, Sri Lanka, India, Colombia, Nigeria, Azerbaijan. So there are a lot of country markets that have low saturation, which provide opportunities for retailers to make investments. And that's exactly where most retailers are beginning to look to make their investments. Countries in the top 30 of the GRDI, where saturation is showing that the window of opportunity for global investment may be beginning to close, include Chile, which has been top ranked for a number of years now, and Mexico, which is so saturated that if it weren't for how exciting the market is, it probably wouldn't be on the list at all. The fourth variable we call urgency or time pressure, and as countries rank high on this variable, it means that their GDP is growing fast, but retail sales per capita is growing faster. So it's urgent for retailers to make investments in these markets. As markets mature, GDP growth usually slows down, and retail sales per capita also slows down, and that's when urgency goes down. Not surprisingly, countries like China and Mongolia, where government policy is focusing on building up consumer spending relative to GDP growth, they rank high on this variable. Equally not surprising, Gulf states like Oman, Kuwait, and Qatar rank so low on this variable that the window of opportunity for global retail investment is beginning to close. And so if you remember this window of opportunity, the Gulf states have gone through their peak opportunity for investment, and they're beginning to come down the right-hand side, and we anticipate, as has happened this year with a couple of the Gulf states, they begin to drop off because they're too sophisticated, too saturated. So when all the variables are put together, here's where the top 30 countries for 2015 shape up. And this presents our first trend in global retail, where the future opportunity is for global retail investment. Central and South America still show up very strong, and Middle East and Central and South Asia are also very interesting. The Middle East has 6 countries, South Asia and Central Asia also show up. Interesting this year is we have 3 markets in Africa, one in North Africa and 2 in Sub-Saharan Africa. And I would just mention that as we do this, there are 4 more countries in Africa that will probably soon make it on the list. So their window of opportunity is opening up, and it begins to be a very good opportunity for retailers to make investments. One thing I would say, because I think it's very relevant for Korean retailers, is the reason that, for example, UK retailers or German retailers or French retailers go and invest in developing markets is because they have no more room for growth within their own markets. And so in order to maintain growth and satisfy their shareholders, they found that investing in developing markets globally is really the only way to sustain the level of growth that they're looking for. So this is a very strong trend, and we see all of the major retailers around the world seriously considering how to get involved in global retail. So that's the current trend on global retail investment and development from a global retail development point of view. Our second topic is what are the trends about consumer and shoppers, how they are changing their behavior in these different markets. What's the impact that's having on global retailers? And in this area, things are happening very quickly. I think if we want to talk about a trend in retail, the speed at which consumer and shopper behavior is changing is unprecedented. Telephone handset technology, inexpensive handsets for developing markets, better communication networks overall. More importantly, we're seeing a significant shift in how consumers are using connected technology to shop and buy, but also to build personal and business relationships and to get entertainment. We recently completed a survey of more than 10,000 consumers in 10 countries around the world, and the results have a couple of surprises for us about consumers and shoppers and how they're changing their behavior. Now, you would think that shoppers and consumers getting more connected would be a terrific opportunity for retailers and branded manufacturers that serve them to communicate better, to understand them more effectively, and to tailor services and products that more specifically meet their needs. But it's not how it is working out. The pace of change in consumer and shopping behavior and the consumer's rapid increase in the use of all sorts of technologies has exposed some really out-of-date thinking about how retail works. And one of the trends is many retailers, I would say most retailers, feel like they're playing catch-up to bring the level of their own operations up to the level of the sophistication of consumers and shoppers. Outdated measurements, outdated key performance indicators, outdated incentive programs for their employees. The impact of the connected consumer really puts traditional measures of retail success to the test. For example, how do we measure store managers when perhaps 50% of the shoppers will go into the store, they'll look, they'll browse, they'll try on clothes, they'll talk to a sales associate for 30 minutes, and then they go home and they buy online. What's a store manager supposed to do? How do we measure shopping malls when foot traffic has been declining, even though sales per square meter is going up? Because shopping trips now are less frequent but more productive, because shoppers do their discovery more online, and some of the test and trial online as well. And then how do marketeers and advertisers measure the effectiveness of their campaigns when more and more people rely on social media rather than advertising and interact with their friends and colleagues to decide on products to buy and stores to shop at? And they don't even buy the magazines or newspapers where the advertisements appear sometimes. So there are three things that came out of this connected consumer survey, and this is also available on atkearney.com. It's very comprehensive. I just wanted to give you some highlights today. The internet, for most of the shoppers and customers that we're interested in, the internet is a 24/7 reality. Second, there are 4 primary reasons why customers and shoppers get online. And then third, social media is increasingly important, but not necessarily linked to consumption. So let's look at each one. For most, connectivity, most of the respondents say that they're connected to the internet nearly every waking hour. But respondents in Brazil are twice as likely to be connected all day long than respondents in Japan, which we found interesting. And 66% of Nigerians reported being online 10 times a day or more, compared with only 40% of Germans. So you can see the comparison of some of the developing markets, which is all day long, more than 10 times a day, compared to some of the more developed markets like Japan and Germany, UK, and even the United States. And so that's one of the findings that we thought was quite interesting. Certainly the younger unmarried demographic of developing markets is conducive to this behavior, although we see fairly high connectedness in age cohorts up to about 65 years old. Now, there are many motivations for our connected consumers to go online, but the top 4 are developing and maintaining interpersonal relationships, self-expression, and this is reported by them. We ask them, why do you go online? Well, I want to maintain interpersonal relationships, I want to express myself, I want to explore, and it's convenient. And so now if we look, this is a little bit of a difficult chart to read, but I'll just go by the colors. The red indicates that the country in question under-indexes on that particular characteristic. So here we have the 4 reasons to go online. And you'll see Japan, for example, under-indexes on everything about personal relationships and self-expression. And frankly, almost all of the developing markets under-index on self-expression. Whereas you look at other countries like in India, maintaining relationships at a very high over-index, 94% I think that says, as an indication of one of the things Indians do because they travel from home is they use social media to keep in touch with the family and friends. Similarly, you can see as we go down the chart on convenience that you get Germany and Japan over-indexing on convenience, but interestingly, you also get many of the developing markets over-indexing as well. So to us, this is a little bit of a counterintuitive result. In this area, once again, there's a sharp divide between well-developed markets and places where offline expression is limited, like Nigeria, like Brazil, like India. For these people, the ability to express themselves or express an opinion is very highly rated. For example, in Brazil and China, 80% of the respondents said their primary reason for going online was for social media and online entertainment, and that's roughly double Germany. Developed markets like the US, UK, Germany, and Japan over-index on transactional services and shopping. So usage of the internet, usage of the connected consumer really varies market by market. Social media networks are the online places where connected consumers spend the most time, again, except for Japan. And you can see Japan is very short. The bar for social networking is the one on the top there. Younger consumers enjoy the social marketing much more than older consumers. As a matter of fact, over 35 years old, consumers really don't like the social media as much as the younger age cohorts. And consumers in some emerging markets like Brazil, China, and Nigeria tell us they actually enjoy and follow pop-ups and banners. Whereas in Western Europe and the United States, most respondents said that they get annoyed when they see pop-ups. Now let's discuss the impact of the connected consumer and e-commerce on retailing and the physical store. This is the result of a survey of more than 2,500 shoppers in the United States about online and in-store shopping preferences. And the good news is, shoppers love stores. We keep hearing about Amazon or Gmarket or online sales as if 90% of the sales are online, and that's not the case, not even in Korea. The interesting finding here was, in addition, this is the United States data, I think the number for online sales in Korea is probably about 20%, but I believe the following result will be similar, is not only are 90% of sales through physical stores, but in addition to that, half of online sales are through websites of companies that own physical stores. So that's the idea that pure plays are somehow rolling over existing department stores, grocery stores, bookstores, et cetera, is not bound by the facts, and it's certainly not bound by consumer preferences. Shoppers really do love stores. 60% of shoppers who bought something online go into a physical store at some point during their shopping journey. And people who buy online, I mentioned 50% will buy from a website of a store that has a physical location as well. This has trended to be a very big discussion among retailers in the US about omni-channel retailing. And it's still a very unformed vocabulary. When you talk to managers, leaders of the retail environment, it's pretty clear that they don't really know what the end point is, what success looks like. It's just, and it's not really omni-channel either, because there are a lot of channels for receiving consumer information or delivering product and service that we won't be using. But right now, people are looking at absolutely everything to try to understand what it means. But think about it. If a shopper looks online for a dress and then goes into the store to try it on and see the fabric, checks her mobile to see if she can get a discount coupon for it, then goes home and buys it online, decides she doesn't like it, so she takes it back to the store, that actually describes a lot of how shoppers shop today. So two trends come out of this, this change. The first is changing the idea for retailers where they create value and where retailers capture value. Now this chart shows the shopping journey from discovery through test and trial, through delivery options, purchase, delivery options, and the eventual return. And you can see a fairly large percentage do everything in the store. And put that together with the people who go online to investigate and discover, and then do the rest in the store. Do the rest in the store, and you make up almost half of the shopping journeys. Yes, there are some people who do everything online. That's obviously very category specific. But then there are another, we put 4 here, but there are actually another 25. So there are another 29 combinations of how shoppers shop, mixing digital with physical. So value creation, value capture. In today's retail environment, many retailers think value is captured when the cash register rings the sale or when the shopper pushes the order button on the phone or on the internet. But value is really created all along the value chain. A very strong trend in retailing now is to try to be indifferent to the point of value capture and value creation. But again, it's challenging traditional retail measures and key performance indicators. Certainly if a retailer is vertically integrated, it is easier to be more relaxed about this, if you will. If the shopper can't get the product anywhere but your store or from your website, then you really can focus on value creation and not so much about value capture. On the other hand, if you're selling flat screen TVs or shampoo, then your store staff will have to work harder to get the sale in the store because the shopper could get the product at another source, probably at a cheaper price and with free delivery. This drives the second trend, which is truly a change in the industry. Guide posting is a word that we really didn't hear much 3 years ago. And today, what we heard 3 years ago was showrooming, the experience of a customer coming into the store, taking up the sales associate's time, looking at the inventory, and then going home and buying it online. And people were upset about the concept of showrooming. Now this has all begun to turn around. And we have what we call guidepost stores, guide posting, and actually some of these retailers refer to their physical locations as guidepost stores. And there are many stores, where, let's not say many, but there are some stores where you can't even get the product that you're buying. You go into the store, you get informed, and they'll deliver it the next day, or you can go home and buy it online. But the store exists as a lifestyle store to help you understand what's available. A lot of retailers who were only online once, like Warby Parker and Athleta, are rapidly opening stores in order to take advantage of the physical interaction with the customer. And what's interesting about this is when an online-only retailer opens a physical store, the online revenues go up almost sometimes as much as 500%. So opening a physical store has a big impact on what happens online. Bonobos is an interesting clothing company for men, is an interesting example of an online-only store, and they've decided to open physical stores, and they're mailing out catalogs to see where they should put the stores. And that's pretty unbelievable when even 5 years ago, if you think about it, an online-only retailer sending out paper catalogs to find out where they should put their stores. So this is a big transformation and a major trend, particularly in apparel, housewares, but we anticipate that we'll see this in many other categories as well. Williams-Sonoma is a perfect example of a well-established online and physical retailer. They're reducing the number of their stores, but they're increasing the footprint of the stores so that they can provide shoppers a better guide posting experience. So to summarize, the global macroeconomic environment is changing rapidly. Consumer behavior is changing more rapidly than ever before. and retailers are scrambling to redefine their role in the shopping journey. It really is an interesting time to be a retailer in the world today, and that's not always easy. Let me offer a framework as you think of how your company will respond to these trends. We call it the 3 I's, and they stand for immediate, intimate, and indifferent. And those words mean something a little bit different in this context, so let me describe them. Immediate refers to the retailer's requirement to quickly transform the product service offering to each shopper as quickly as they possibly can. Click and pick up, next day delivery, kiosk in store. The connected consumer is notoriously impatient and doesn't want to fit into somebody else's way of doing business. This is particularly true for millennials. An interesting finding from this study is that teenagers and seniors tend to behave the same way with regard to physical stores. But once people, at least in the United States, get to be about 30, so millennials, they don't shop as much as the teens and baby boomers, and seniors, and many would do everything online if they could. It's an exaggeration, of course, but millennials are starting to have children. They don't have a lot of money, and they have very little patience for working with bureaucracies. So flexibility in the omni-channel right now is keeping retail leaders up at night. The second, intimate, refers to being insightful about shoppers' needs and interests, from loyalty cards or opt-in GPS, couponing, or beaconing within the stores. But the insights have to be tailored, but not too tailored, because it freaks people out. And they have to be truly enriching to the shopper. Generic offers and beacons that say, hey, look at me, are as useful as pop-up ads are on the internet. And that brings us to the third point, which we call indifferent. And it refers to treating each shopper with respect equally and letting them maintain their anonymity if they want. That's why opt-in services are a trend within retailing today. The shopper lets you know that they are interested in additional engagement. With so much changing at the same time, many retailers are thinking up things that many shoppers either don't want or don't need. From the preference survey, we developed a list of the top 10 things shoppers want and the bottom 10 things they don't want. In the bottom 10, free valet parking, childcare, personal shopper, package aggregation. And these are all things that retailers are pushing to try to figure out and be successful at. In the top 10, however, accurate inventory information. If you're out of stock, can you get it to me in a day or two? Help me use my phone to find what I'm looking for. Things that retailers really should have been working on for the last 100 years or so. So we've looked at trends in global retail macroeconomics, dramatic changes in how consumers are connecting and behaving, how retailers are trying to respond to changing views on shopping in-store and online. But let's get back to basics and look at a trend that is having a great and greater impact on retailers, perhaps more than any other. Retailers are thinking more and more about their shoppers as consumers and customers, but also as employees and citizens. Retailers employ lots of people, and we serve billions of people every day. And so as an industry, retail has a broader and deeper responsibility than almost any other industry sector. We touch the lives of billions of people, and so must ensure that the interaction is constructive and enriching for them as well as for us. And that is the greatest trend in global retailing today. Thank you very much.
네, 지금까지 마이크 모리아티 AT커니 시니어 파트너님이 발표해 주셨습니다.